Welcome back to another session of the Catechism Corner at King of Kings. Today we continue moving through the Ten Commandments, and we are on the fifth commandment, you shall not murder. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that here today. But as always, any questions, put them in the comments. Likes and subscribes also help with getting this out there, and so please do so. That is always a helpful thing for the algorithms and things of that nature. But today we're going to be focusing, as I said, on the fifth commandment, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. You may have noticed a pattern here as we've been going through the commandments. Oftentimes the commandment is in the negative, what we are to avoid. Today, you shall not murder. But with every avoidance of a negative action, there is the flip side, as is pointed out in the meaning of Luther's Small Catechism. And so there's things we avoid, but then there are things that we are called to do. And this is one of those important things to keep in mind when we are talking about the fifth commandment. You shall not murder. Now, most people have not murdered anybody in the fullest sense of that word, meaning killing them in an unjust way, and most people have not done that. And so if on the surface you think, well, I haven't murdered anybody, so that's good, please don't. But it also applies to physically hurting people. We don't want to physically hurt people. We don't want to be violent people. And so it just because you stop short of them dying would not make you safe from not violating this commandment. But Jesus also drills deeper in his teaching, specifically in the early part of the book of Matthew, chapter 5, when he says, you have heard it said that you shall not murder, but I tell you that you should not even have hate in your heart. If you have hate in your heart, you are already guilty of murder. And so there is where we begin to run into some areas where we might struggle with. There are times when our hearts are filled with hate towards our neighbor. Maybe they have done something to us. Maybe we think they've done something to us, but we are consumed with that. And Jesus says that before God, we are actually guilty of murder. But then on the flip side, the positive, we are called to protect, we are to come to the aid of our neighbor, and we are to have compassion and kindness towards our neighbor. These are the positive aspects of what we are to do in response to the fifth commandment, you shall not murder. And one story of the scriptures that really helps us with understanding both the negative and the positive sides of this commandment would be the story of the Good Samaritan. The robbers beat up the individual and they leave him for dead. They steal his stuff. And so they would have violated the things that you are not supposed to do. You are not supposed to harm your neighbor. But then the priest and the Levite come by, and they also violate this commandment by not helping, not coming to the aid, not assisting those who are in need and protecting them. You see, this commandment is all about preserving life. So we obviously don't want to harm and hurt life, but we also want to preserve life and care for people. And so a positive part of this in our day and age is helping those who might have fallen on hard times, who are less fortunate than we are. This would be a positive way of carrying out the fifth commandment. And so we want to avoid harm, but we also want to do good and help our neighbor succeed and preserve their life. Now, this commandment obviously has a wide range of areas in our life that it is applicable. We see specific instances in our society. Um, One of the biggest ones that breaks the Christian's heart is the issue of abortion. We believe that at conception, a person is a person. They are created in the image of God. Our Savior himself was a one-day old child in his mother's womb, in Mary's womb. He was the fully divine at that point. He was a fully human being at that point, still growing, developing as all of us were in our mother's wombs. But God is knitting us together there. And so we want to preserve life. We want to not support things like abortion. We want to help those who might find themselves in a difficult time with a difficult pregnancy. Whatever the circumstances that have led to that pregnancy, at that point, it is the call of the Christian to help preserve that life. Destroying that life is never going to be a God pleasing thing. And so we would be against surgical abortions as well as chemical abortions. This would be the destruction of life. So, from conception to natural end of life is what we want to support. There's some other difficult issues revolving around children in the mother's womb. Medical issues can come into play. One that is specific to our culture and society is the issue of IVF, where many people are created and only the ones that are going to be used are given a chance to live and the others are destroyed. And this, of course, is also taking life, and we lament that and we avoid those things. We also know that the Lord has died for the sin of abortion, just as he has died for the sins that are a part of our life as well, if that's not something that we have succumbed to. And so we want to make sure that we are people of life. One example of this is when that speaks to the humanity of the unborn child. In Luke chapter 1, when Mary and Elizabeth come together and they greet one another, it says that John, the unborn child in his mother's womb, in Elizabeth's womb, leaps for joy at the presence of Christ, his Lord, in the womb of Mary. And so here we get this picture of these are people, they just happen to be located inside of their mothers. And so we take that very seriously. But we also want to talk about the other end of the lifetime. We want to talk about issues suicide. This would be something that is not in line with this commandment. Killing ourselves, assisted suicide is also not part of God's plan. And we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to preserve life. Those end of life questions can be difficult, they can be hard, but taking an action, a specific action to end a life, would be counter to God's will and God's desire for humanity. But along with these, we've talked about there's different levels or different ways. Self-destructive behavior would also be counter to this. We don't want to do things intentionally to ourselves. Substance abuse, those types of things, this would be not preserving life. And so we want to do everything we can to be people of life. Some other specific instances that relate to this commandment. deal with how the state is called to carry out their duties. Um, what about the military? What about law enforcement? What about capital punishment? The Lord, as I talked about in the last commandment, has established the state with very specific roles in life. And there are times where military action is, in fact, called for, and it is a good thing, and even if it is taking life. And so we want to, as Christian people, we can support our military, we can support these things, but those who are a part of the military also need to recognize that just because they have been given an order to go to war doesn't make that order a good order. And so there needs to be thought, there needs to be um, consideration as to whether this is a good and a just thing to be a part of. In our own society, much closer to home, we're not seeing military action, but we've recently seen a lot of law enforcement action. And with the tragic loss of life that has taken place, we must we want to respect our law enforcement, but we also and law enforcement is to be supported, and they have been given the task, if needed, to use force and deadly force to protect and to preserve other life. But we also have to look at each circumstance on an individual basis. Just because something is quote unquote legal doesn't mean it is just or justified. And so we want to always hold those things in tension. Just because the court system doesn't have a way to punish something doesn't mean that it is good, doesn't mean that it is right, and doesn't mean that it is God pleasing. And so we evaluate those circumstances as best we can. Um, and remember, the goal is always for preservation of life. The role of the government, though, at times is to punish evildoers, and they have been given the task to use the sword. And so capital punishment is allowable. It should be used very prudently and not willy nilly. It should not be taken lightly, but it is something that is allowable by the government to carry it out. So that's the state. The state has been established, has been given specific authorities to punish and to protect in various ways. And that can at times result in using deadly force in certain circumstances. But what about self defense? Self defense is not a light question. It is not something we just do or take with very little thought process. We always want to consider um, uh, deeply the circumstances that self-defense, specifically deadly force, might be used. When we're defending other people, let's say somebody breaks into my home and is seeking to harm my family, that's a little bit easier of a question in regards to defending my family. But when it becomes defending ourselves, where do we draw the line? What are we called to do? How is it that we are turning the other cheek? Those types of questions are not easy and probably would require a whole another podcast video to dive deeply into. But we want to make sure that we are not simply ending life with very little thought and very little consideration for what God calls his people to do. One thing that we are never to be doing is seeking revenge by harming somebody who has harmed us. What really comes to mind is Romans 12, verse 19, when it says, or it reminds us, Beloved, never avenge yourself, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink, for by so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So revenge is never permissible, even if somebody has done us great harm. And so we keep that in mind in relationship to the fifth commandment. And so this fifth commandment is sometimes thought of as one we don't have to give much consideration, right? I'm not really going to murder anyone. But it's much deeper than that. It deals with not simply the act of murdering, but of harming, as well as hatred within our heart. And we do want to be people who are doing the positive, protecting, coming to the aid of others, um, treating others with kindness and compassion. So, this fifth commandment, you shall not murder, is one that has great application for us because we are to fear and love God so that we do not hurt or harm our neighbor in his body, but help and support him in every physical need. If there's any questions that you have in regards to this, would love to hear them in the comments. If you have a comment just to share, would also throw them in the comment section. And I pray that you continue to be blessed as we study the Catechism together at King of Kings.